Okay guys, so I'm going to do a bit of a recap of the Student Nationals tournament that we've done at this weekend. I did say I'd get battle reports done. I apologise, they're not going to go up. The way the tournament was set out, it was really rushed. I'm going to get more into it in a second, but just sort of throw up this quick little picture here. As we mentioned in the video we did on the Friday night that we were going to be wargaming in suits all day, so there's me and my buddy John. The morning of the Saturday at the hotel, we just figured, you know, we're playing really barbite races, we'll wear some suits. And it went down quite funny. We got, you know, it's a funny spectacle with some good looks. So we'll kick into the mainstay of the video here. So this again is going to be a picture of my army. I'm having computer trouble at the moment. Some issues with my laptop, so I'm having to record all this on my tablet. I'm not too sure on the whole actually video camera in the thing, so I'm not going to go into using that right away, but it does have a pretty cool video editing application already on it, where you can just sit here and record while the pictures are going through, so it makes it quite easy just to do these kind of videos. So start off with some comments on the tournament as a whole. It was quite well attended, both 40k and fantasy. There was about 50 players per category, which, you know, so this was a fairly large scale tournament. In the whole, it's about 100 people. Obviously per category it's fairly small, but as a whole it was a fairly decent sized tournament. 5 game setup. And it was kind of done using the Swiss system, where, you know, the winners play the winners and the losers play the losers, that sort of thing. It was fairly well managed in that sense. However, I was fairly disappointed with the time settings on the Saturday in particular. Bearing in mind I was playing 2,000 points games of fantasy, and there was allocated just over 2 hours per game. Now that's not a lot at all. You know, when you consider you've got to, you move to your table, you meet your opponent, you tend to chat for a few minutes, and then you start rolling, you get stuff out, and there's such a short amount of time to play 2,000 points of fantasy. You know, most tournaments you'll go to, you'll get at least 2.5 hours. Now, it doesn't seem like a big difference, but that extra 30 minutes goes a long way. So this is the premises why I didn't actually have time to make any battle reports on the weekend, just because it just felt so rushed. The time constraints were so tight. I didn't feel comfortable pulling my camera out and having to explain to my opponent, I'm going to take pictures, I'm going to be taking notes, you know, your mind, blah blah blah. The time constraints were really tight in that sense. The ironic thing being is most of my games finished after about an hour, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a second as to why that happened. But yeah, after about, you know, an hour and 10 minutes, in one case it was 45 minutes, the game was over. But obviously, at the point where I realised it was not going to go the whole length, I hadn't taken pictures of the first 2-3 turns, so there was no point in me starting. So it was a really lacklustre weekend in that respect, because I was really looking forward to having a pretty laid back time, taking some pictures, having a good laugh with my opponent, making some battle reports, and that just never came to fruition. So I was quite disappointed with that. So we'll basically run through the games. My final standings was I probably finished 8th or 9th out of about 50, which isn't too bad. I did want to place. This tournament was doing 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and actually 4th. I would have liked to have placed in the top 4. I wasn't, you know, fortuitous enough for that to happen. So never got the final standings. I don't know if they've been put up on the website or whatever, but I probably finished around 8th or 9th. I finished my final game, I was in the top 5, and then I lost my final game, so that pushed me back down a little bit. Okay, so I'll just quickly recap my games. Like I say, no battle reports, I'm afraid. However, I still remember the games, they're fresh in my mind. This is only the Monday morning, so I've still got the whole tournament still fresh in my mind, so I'll do this now. Game 1, I faced off against some demons. Bearing in mind the video me and John did on the Friday, the demons were using the old book, so this was not a game against the new demons book, this was old demons book. The guys list was 5 blood crushers and a herald of Khorne, a block of plague bearers with a herald, a unit of horrors with a herald, BSB, the changeling, and he basically only had 2 level 2s. I think his Tzeentch Herald was a level 2, and the unit of horrors were a level 2. That was all his magic, and he had some Nurglings that were scouting. Now I looked at that and I thought, this is a game I can win. I pretty much had him out-magicked. Neither of us had any shooting, and I had him out-combated. I really thought that if I get my chariots into his blood crushers to soften them up, my skull crushers could finish him off. My warriors are more than a match for his units, and we could just play redirection games with each other on the far side with the hounds and the nurglings. I really thought this was a good matchup, and it was going to be a victory in my favour. However, it finished a 20-0 loss. I absolutely got massacred. I picked up no points at all. He wiped me out completely, and this is why. The game was going great. I was lining up my three Gold Beast chariots to charge into his blood crushers. All 3 were in the general's leadership range and the BSB range. 1 Gold Beast chariot fails his frenzy test, has to charge, completes the charge. I thought that's okay. The other 2, fairly reasonable charge distance. I think one needed an 8 and one needed a 9, or maybe it was something like that. Basically, it was like a 9 and an 8. Not unmakeable charges with Swift Stride whatsoever. They both failed. So I had 1 Gore Beast go into the Blood Crushers solo. He went in. He actually killed 2 Blood Crushers and then got wiped out. So that was actually a fantastic showing for the Gore Beast. It just shows if those other 2 had got in, I would have wiped out the unit. That was the first thing that went wrong for me. He then overran his turn and he got the charge off against, I think it was my Tzeentch block, just the way he managed to, position it. I can't really remember that completely, but I think that's what happened. The biggest thing in this game was my Nurgle block of warriors with halberds charged into his plague bearers. I inflict something like 12 or 13 wounds. He makes 10 ward saves. 10 regeneration saves from 13 wounds. I lose the combat by 1 and he runs me down. At this point I was so frustrated. I was so angry. He should have lost combat by 2 or 3 or 4. He takes his test, kills a few more, but it's fine. I wasn't going to run the unit down. Demons are unbreakable, that's fine. But what wouldn't have happened was my level 4 sorcerer and my 18 warriors would not have been run down. From then on, he completely controlled the game. I couldn't get my skull crushers in where it mattered. I think in the end I managed to kill his blood crushers, and that was about it. I don't even think I did that. Basically, it finished a 20-0 loss, and at this point I was so deflated after seeing the army across the table, really thinking I could win, and just a combination of bad luck and my opponent rolling dice like a god, rolling 5s and 6s like it was going out of fashion. I lost the game. So I was really deflated after the first game. We finished early because, again, like I say, I got massacred. So the end of my turn 4, I had nothing left. He was able, from that point, got into both flanks of the Tzeentch block, wiped them out, ran them down, and it just went badly. Game 2, I faced off against a Tomb Kings player. I ironically played on the exact same table I played in Game 1, so I didn't have to move anywhere, which is nice. I played against a Tomb Kings player who was running Khalida, 2 level 2s, one of them Hierophant, Ramotep the Visionary, which I kind of didn't see why he was in the list. He really didn't add anything to that list. He had a unit of 69 archers, so you see he's running pretty much the Khalida bomb. He had a unit of 6 Necropolis Knights, a unit of 4 Tomb Swarms, 2 10-man skeleton units just as dead drops on the Casket of Souls. What really broke this game for my opponent was he didn't roll the Righteous Smiting, which would have given his archers the multiple shot. I probably would have tried to dispel it every turn anyway, because Tomb King magic isn't necessarily anything to be afraid of. if you can mitigate its circumstantial use. But basically, he didn't roll the spells he needed. Turn 1, his wizard turned himself into a level 0. Turn 3, his other wizard sucked himself into the warp, so he had no magic. I got the shadow buffs off on his Necropolis Knights. The Skull Crushers polished them off. I was able to wipe out his Tomb Swarms, his 2 Skeleton Blocks, and the Casket of Souls. Basically wipe everything out apart from his... I think all that was left was Khalida and the Archers, because I managed to kill all the characters off once I got into combat. I was just targeting all my attacks on the characters, and basically I ended up getting a 20-0 victory. So it wiped out my first loss, and kind of made me feel a bit more upbeat for the rest of the day that I'd managed to get, a crushing victory after my crushing loss. This necessarily wasn't a bad game, apart from my opponent's 2 miscasts. Neither of us really rolled excessively well, nor excessively badly. It was kind of just a case of you didn't really have the tools necessary to beat me, and I counteracted his killer unit, those 6 Necropolis Knights, really well. At one point they were weapon skill 1 and strength 2, and they just weren't doing any damage to the Skull Crushers. And obviously they had Killing Blow, but on Monster's infantry, so Monster's cavalry, so it made no difference. So that was a 20-0 victory to the Warriors of Chaos. At this point, I moved up the standings a little bit, and then I faced against a High Elf player. First time I played against High Elves, I think ever, possibly. The guy's army was a fairly poor army in all respects. He had a level 4 wizard, 2 level 2 wizards, 15 swordmasters, a big block of spearmen, excuse me, a unit of archers, 2 bolt throwers, 2 eagles. The problem with his army was his level 4 and one of his level 2s were both running high magic, and the other level 2 was running life magic. So not only did he overspend fairly massively on his wizards, he had a very poor choice of magic. I was trying to explain to him afterwards. I think we were discussing the game afterwards that if he'd have took Shadow or even took Life on his level 4, it would have been a completely different game. But how the game went was I managed to win the roll to go first, I believe, and I moved everything forward. He fired all his bows and his bolt throwers. His first magic phase basically added 6 to the casting of all my spells. That's the only thing he cast. He just cast Drain Magic 3 times. One of them failed, 2 of them went through, and he added +6 to all my spells, which didn't really matter. I then moved up again. Another round of shooting didn't do anything, and then I managed to complete the charge with my Skull Crushers into his Swordmasters, got my Zinch block into his Spearmen. I managed to get my Nurgle block into his Bolt Throwers, and I basically just completely crushed him in 2 rounds of combat, so like 1 game turn worth of combat. I dropped the Swordmasters down to like strength 3, and then at that point, they lose everything about being a Swordmaster. They couldn't penetrate the armour of the Skull Crushers, and they just got steamrolled. And in the end, it ended up being a 20-0 victory to myself, and this was the game that finished in, I think it was just over 45 minutes. It finished in sort of, we actually played out 6 turns, but because I was into his line so quickly, it was just a matter of, it was like a charge, wipe out the unit, overrun, charge, wipe out the unit, overrun, and the last 3 turns of the game were over in sort of 10 minutes, because it was basically, he had nothing to do, and we were just rolling combats, and I was winning them. So after my crushing loss in game 1, I then went on, had 2 crushing victories. So I was moving up the standings fairly well. I still thought I had potentially a chance to place in the top 4 if I could continue on my current form going into day 2. Moving into day 2, game 1 was against an Ogre player, and I was really looking forward to playing Ogres all weekend because I was taking Shadow Magic, so I always like playing against low initiative armies because it's always satisfying to drop a Pit of Shades on your opponent when they've got initiative 1 or initiative 2. What ended up happening was his army was a level 3 Slaughtermaster. He had a Butcher, a Bruiser. he had like 3 or 4 units of ogre bulls, and it was a fairly intimidating army to look at. It was just, I think it was a unit of 10 and 3 units of 8 ogre bulls and a stonehorn, I want to say. And yeah, it was just this wall of big things, and it was fairly intimidating to play against. He won the roll-off to go first, and he just moved full steam ahead, 12 inches with everything. I thought this was a mistake, because basically he got well within easy charge range of pretty much everything in my army. What ended up happening was, I moved up my warhounds in front of these, he had some Mournfang cavalry as well. So basically I moved up my dogs in front of his 10-man unit of bulls and in front of his stonehorn. I then managed to complete the charge with 2 Gorbeast chariots into his Mournfang cavalry. I inflict something like 9 wounds and then overrun the last guy. I may have even wiped out the entire unit, but either way, I killed all the Mournfangs, overran, and had 2 chariots behind his lines. He then got the charge off with his big block of with his 10-man bull unit into my Nurgle guys, and he rolled like a demon. I mean, he needs 5s to hit with however many attacks it was, and he rolled like 70% hits when it should have been 33%, you know, or hitting on 5s. He then just annihilated the unit completely. I didn't have that many, you know, even after I think I peeled off like his entire back rank. He just steamrolled me with bulls, overran, killed the level 4, killed the Nurgle guys, and it was a bloodbath. On the opposite flank, he got the Stonehorn into my Tzeentch block because the dogs failed their terror test, ran away, so he redirected into the Tzeentch guys. Complete mistake on my part, completely forgetting that the dogs, the Stonehorn caused terror. The dogs ran away, redirected into my Tzeentch block, who held up the Stonehorn for about, I want to say, 7 rounds of combat, which was really, really funny. I was having a 6-up armor save and a 6-up ward save, 5-up parry, 6-up ward save, and I was rolling, probably met the average of 6s, but it felt like a lot. Whenever you roll a 6, it always feels like you're beating the odds, even if you're hitting the odds. But basically what ended up happening was my Skull Crushers cleaned up one of his Ogre Bulls unit, beat him on his turn, reformed, charged the rear of the Stonehorn, wiped it out. My Gorbeast charged his other Bulls unit. I basically ended up wiping him out completely. There was nothing left on the table. All I had left was the 3 Gorbeasts and the Skull Crusher unit. But because he managed to claim a fair amount of points, I ended up getting an 18-2 victory. He managed to salvage some points just because of killing my 2 big blocks. So even though I tabled him completely, I didn't get a 20-0 victory. I got an 18-2 victory. But again, it's another good crushing victory, surging up the rankings even higher, going into Game 5 of the tournament. So moving into Game 5, I played against another Warriors of Chaos army. I was fairly fortunate to only play him once. Now, this guy, it was fairly funny because we'd been playing on the tables next to each other the entire tournament, and he was looking at my list, and I was looking at his list, and, you know, he was saying, like, oh, I don't want to face the chariots, I don't want to face those chariots, and in Game 5, we ended up playing, and it was a fairly good contest. This game really frustrated me, because his turn 1, he pre-measured everything, and got everything out of safe charge distance away from the Gorbeast chariots, which was fair enough, which is fine, everyone does that. What annoyed me is I positioned all my units in such a way that he couldn't complete a particular charge. I moved up my Gorbeast chariots into threatening, because he placed these units in front of things, so he couldn't charge into the Gorbeast chariots. So look, I'm going to go there, so it's a safe spot. You're not going to charge with the units in front, and the unit in behind cannot charge. What happened was, he wanted to charge the Demon Prince into the flank of one of my Gorbeast chariots. He could not physically complete the charge because of the way I positioned my units. He contested this, called a ref over, and the referee said he could because I had to wheel to him. I was trying to explain that you cannot wheel through one of your own units, which was, you know, it was stupid. He wouldn't have it. Referees ruling overrides everything. And basically, the referee let him cheat, basically, which really frustrated me. And through a combination of that, it just basically locked up my entire flank of the battle line. So that basically led to me losing my, it blocked up one flank, and I was really frustrated, and I made lots of mistakes from then on because of just basically the way he was allowed to break the rules of the game. He got the charge into one of my Gobi's chariots. I then counter-charged my Zinch block. I couldn't roll anything. I couldn't hit the side of a barn all game. And basically just crushed my entire army. And I ended up losing 20-0, which really frustrated me because I was doing so well for the last 3 games. I was, surging my way back up the rankings. And, that was that. I have to say, I learnt a lot from this tournament. Basically, the Warriors of Chaos player that I played last was running the Demon Prince. Now, before the tournament, I was really, really contemplating whether to run the Demon Prince or not to. I ended up talking myself out of running the Demon Prince. I'm not exactly sure why I did that. However, I've learnt a lot. I'm going to do another video on my, closing thoughts in terms of going forward with the